Everybody here, we can do anything for you anytime we're here for you. And so let me first tell you where the restrooms are, because that's a good thing to know. And where the water fountain is. It's right down the hall where many of you passed it. And those restrooms are right there also. We have restrooms upstairs too. So we have restrooms all over the place, right? If you will take a minute to double check and make sure your cell phones are off. Thank you. I was at an event at St. Simon's, and they kept, with about 600 people, and they would never make that announcement, and it was like a musical throughout every presentation. So we have something very exciting happening here. We're really glad about somebody coming to be here, but I'm also excited to introduce somebody first that we're excited about having here at ASBURY Memorial. August Alderman grew up in Savannah, Georgia, became one of the finest hairstylists in the world, and then felt the call to ministry, got educated at Chicago Theological Seminary, and during that time he was our minister intern here at ASBURY. And then not long ago, he graduated and was ordained and then was hired to be the associate minister here, and we're really glad about that. We also made a lot of his hair clients very angry. But as you can see, it has really blessed me with my hairstyle. August, come make some introductions.
Thank you, everybody. It's so good to see everyone. Thank you for being here. I just want to, that's what I want to say. I want to say thank you for being here, and thank you each for helping us to create a space where everyone hopefully feels safe and loved. And for right now, I'd like to welcome Michael Bell up, who is the Executive Director of the Savannah Pride Center, to say a few words for us.
Thank you for everybody for being here, and thank you for having me to say a few words about the Pride Center. Hello, how's everybody feeling today? Huh? Oh my goodness. So gay. This is great. Don't we need a little bit of gay in our life? After today, after seeing the news, after seeing the pride flag taken down from the Stonewall Monument today, today is an important day. Every day is an important day to keep showing up for the community. So I'm the Executive Director of the Pride Center. I won't take too much of your time just to say that we're the only Pride Center in the state, and we're a medical hub for the community. We do mental and behavioral health for free. We do free gynecology visits, free gynecology. We do free wellness checks. We do free HIV testing, STD panels. We have an inclusive healing clinic that is now 2 months in a waiting list because of the amount of people that we have coming to see us. 4 hours in every direction is the people that we serve at the Savannah Pride Center. We have support groups. Thank you so much. So, support groups in the evening, trans care, hormone replacement therapy in a world, in a region in the Deep South where we have one of the most populated areas for LGBTQ plus people. In the South, over 50% of transgender people live in the South. That's amazing. We have such an incredible population, but the issue here is that, you know, it used to be when I was a kid, you'd go to major big cities, and if you were queer, that's where you'd go, and we'd all retire in Florida. But now, that's not the case. Now, mid-sized cities like Savannah are seeing the influx of LGBTQ population, but here's the problem. We don't have the medical infrastructure or the social infrastructure for our population. And when medical institutions like our hospitals pull back affirming care, when our youth, and our youth talking like 18 to 30, right? I know. When they're searching for hormone replacement therapy, when they have no parents, when they come here to live their best life, their most authentic life, And they also come here, a population with little to no sexual education from rural communities. We start to have a major issue, and that's what's happening right now. We have a major medical issue here, not only in Savannah, Chatham County, but in the state of Georgia. Georgia leads the entire country in new HIV cases, okay? And it's very few and far in between of people that are prescribing PrEP, which is the medication that blocks the spread of HIV. So at a time where our funding is being cut, Pride centers are being closed down, Gay Disney is not happening this year as well. Pride festivals are also announcing that they won't be continuing this year. In the face of all that, we need to expand our services because our population is here to stay, to grow, to have families. So job placement, medical care, holistic care, that's what we do. We need to keep expanding. And when you feel powerless in the face of the news, when you struggle with what am I going to do, how do I contribute, look locally. Look to marginalized communities that are right here in Savannah and make your donation, make monthly donations, get involved, volunteer. And that is what the community is calling for from you. So I hope that tonight is uplifting for us as we hear stories from the amazing people that Nico has done this incredible book with. I hope you take with you a new charge to become more active, more visible, and keep showing up even when it rains this hard. Make your way over to our table for services, for PrEP, for PEP, for hormone replacement therapy if you know anybody in need, for displacement. All of our programs are right here. To make a donation, all of that is right here. And I would just leave to say, keep opening up your dinner tables. Keep being there for hard conversations. Keep inviting people into your life. We have a whole population of people out here that have no parents and no family. We see them every day at the center, coming in just to connect with people. And we need more of us together to just keep opening our hearts to stories and to hugs and to just listen and to point people in the right direction for care that is affirming. Okay, thank you.
So Nico Lang is a non-binary, award-winning journalist with over a decade of experience covering the transgender community's fight for equality. Their work has appeared in Rolling Stone, The New York Times, Out, and many other publications. Nico is also the creator of Queer News Daily. Their industry-leading contributions to queer media have resulted in a GLAAD Media Award and 13 awards from the National Association of LGBTQ Journalists. Nico was recently honored by the Human Rights Campaign with the Guardians of Truth Award. Nico, we are really happy you are here. Everyone, please welcome Nico Lang.
Wow. Wow. So the format Nico's chosen is for us to have a conversation. I'll ask some questions and he'll go off. And then after we do that for a while, we'll give you the opportunity to ask questions too. I just met Nico about an hour ago, found out he was from Cincinnati, went to DePaul University in Chicago, spent several years in New York City, he now lives in LA. And I'm very excited because I have two children in New York. One's in Washington Heights and the other's in Inwood. Who knows where Inwood is in New York? That's what I thought. See, I told you. Nobody knows. It's his favorite part of New York.
Best neighborhood in New York, by far.
Is he on okay, y'all?
No, wait.
Here,
you
switch. You've got.
Hello.
That's better. Yeah, this one. I'll try to talk loud in here. But
you just kind of have to eat it.
Okay, yeah. So Inwood's at the very top of Manhattan. It's the last neighborhood, right on top of Washington Heights. It's really a neat place, and it's, well, the area where the Dutch actually had the big deal with the Native Americans was all happen up there. But so let's go ahead and get into the challenges. Okay, does that work for you?
Let's do it.
Tell us about the challenges you had in bringing this book to fruition.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I just want to say thank you all so much for being here. I've been traveling the country for the past 16 months, bringing this book to just as many communities as humanly possible. I think this is my 175th book stop, which is very, very weird. My friend Raquel, who's an amazing journalist and author, when she did her book tour, she complained about doing 9 stops. So I'm like, I've barely been home in a year and a half, and just to come to Savannah that I've never been to before, and I've always wanted a reason to come to. So slay on that one. And to just see this really amazing reception, and I've just loved the city so much. It's so beautiful, and I'm not just saying that because I want you to buy lots of books. I'm just so grateful to be here and so grateful to see this crowd. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for spending your time with me this evening. In terms of actually answering your question, gosh, everything was a challenge. I think, when you get a book published, everybody thinks that, it was so easy and everybody rolled out a red carpet for you and you just dive in your pile of Scrooge McDuck money every night. And to that I say, ha 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 ha, I'll show you my bank account. It's very scary. It's like a Jordan Peele movie in there. You don't want to go in there. And no one wanted to pick this book up. I got no's in languages I've never even heard of. And it wasn't that the people didn't think the book was worthy or important or that the writing wasn't good. The writing slaps, if I do say so myself. It's that I heard 2 things. One publisher, I won't say the name of, Macmillan, told us that the book wasn't realistic because none of the families rejected their kids. Yeah, thank you for that laugh. I was once voted most confrontational in college, and I take a lot of pride in that. So it's a really good thing I was not in that meeting. I watched a lot of The Real Housewives. Wine glasses would have been thrown, tables would have been flipped. If I had a prosthetic leg, I would have thrown it at that woman, you know what I mean? But then every other publisher told us that there was no audience for this book, and it wouldn't sell. So seeing an audience like this turn out for this, seeing people care about these kids and their stories and care about the future of this country, it just means so much to me. It matters so much to me. So thank you for that. I just feel like getting to do this and getting to fight for these kids and their futures, it's my self-care. And nothing about this was preordained. Every step of the way was a huge challenge. I mean, just working, with these kiddos in this environment for, nearly a year of me being on the ground with them, it was really hard. It really took it out of all of us. Because it was kind of imagine that you've got this reporter in your house for 2.5 weeks, right? And every day is sort of the most intense therapy that you've ever been through in your entire life, where you're talking about the good stuff, the bad stuff, everything in between, right? And it's day after day after day for 2.5 weeks. You're sort of mainlining a year of therapy in half a month. That seems like it would be a lot for you, right?
How did you choose the families?
Oh, but just to sort of conclude, sorry,
Oh,
I
okay,
wasn't.
I'm sorry.
No, I was miscuing. That's my fault. That's on me, everyone. But it was just a lot that they were taking on. It's a lot to be that vulnerable with somebody, especially somebody that you've just never met before. I was being introduced to these kids on the ground when I got there, and suddenly they're having to bare their souls to me. That was just a lot. It was a lot of vulnerability. It was a lot of trust that they had to sort of entrust with me to do this book. And taking on these emotions all the time, I don't want to be woe is me, because it's not about me, but just as a little bit of a tidbit, I'm really bad at getting stressed out. My body just cannot handle stress. It's kind of like a grain of sand being in your computer. The whole thing just shuts down immediately. There was this time in West Virginia when I was with the family there where I was just, in their space and sort of really very in the middle of all the trauma they had been experiencing. So I was just taking on that vicarious trauma all the time. I can't tell you why I did this, but I'll say it made sense at the time. I decided to wash my phone, and here's the problem with getting your phone wet. I think a lot of you can figure out it doesn't work then. So I didn't have a phone and didn't have a credit card in rural West Virginia because I had discovered Apple Pay at the time and I thought it was really cool. So I did not have a physical card on me. So my grandparents had to wire me money to a Western Union like a drug dealer. It made me feel very cool. And I grew up Catholic, so I'm good at just like shoving feelings down. So I just sort of was like, don't pay attention to this, don't focus on this, just focus on the work, focus on getting the book done. And I do that, I get home, turn in my first draft of the book, and then I decided to go to the doctor just because I've been feeling really cruddy. And I think everything's COVID. Like, if you were to smack me in the face with a screen door, I'd be like, oh, ow, is this COVID? So I went to just get checked up and just see what was going on. And my doctor was like, oh, well, good news, you don't have COVID. Bad news, your blood pressure is 160 over 100, which if you don't know what that is, good for you. Let's trade bodies. That's bad. That's like getting a D in blood pressure. They legally were not allowed to let me leave until my blood pressure went down. And I'm now on 2 forms of medication a day to make sure I don't just like pop like a balloon. And the reason I tell that story isn't that so you all feel bad for me. It's because I got to leave, I got to spend, this time with these families, but then I got to go home to my lovely husband and my one great cat and my one crappy cat, But these families, they don't have the ability to do that. They don't have the ability to just peace out of their lives. Even if they were to move, they still take all their fights and their battles with them. So one of the reasons that I'm here on the ground bringing this book to you is to fight for them, to uplift their voices in order to say that this isn't sustainable. What we're all going through right now, I think all of you probably feel it. This isn't sustainable. We're not built to live like this. And we've got to fight for a better future for these kids and for ourselves so it doesn't have to be like this forever. Because these kids, they don't deserve this. They profoundly do not deserve this. And I just hope they one day live in a country where they just don't have to deal with this anymore, where they can just be kids.
Amen. Thank you. Wow. So back to that question, how did you choose those families? And you mentioned kind of building trust. How did you do that?
Yeah, well, to answer the first part of that and the how I chose the families, I've been working with families of trans kids for a long time. Actually, this kind of gets to the second part of that first, so I'll answer that first, sorry. Well, what is answering? What are words, really? But things that come out of our mouths. So I've been working with families of trans kids for a long time. The first story I ever did was in 2016 for Teen Vogue. Some of you may know that family. It was Amber Briggle's family. She's sort of one of the more vocal parent advocates, fighting for on behalf of not only her own trans kid, but trans kids across the country. And they'd had a really bad time of it trying to work with other reporters. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I was raised well or something, but I just can't imagine asking an adult in my life about their genitals, let alone a child. So I just respected them and was nice to them, and I am like I am with everybody. I made weird little jokes, and I just kind of brought my whole self to the interview, and I just wrote the story the way that I would want somebody to write a story about me, a story that reflects my full dignity and my humanity. And that really went a long way with them because they'd never experienced something like that before. So when we were done with that story, they recommended me to all of the other families in their networks. So it went from I didn't know any families of trans kids to I had dozens of families of trans kids reaching out to me all the time. Now half of my phone is families of trans kids. And I took that work really seriously. I took that responsibility really seriously because I knew why people were reaching out to me, because they knew that visibility mattered. They hoped to change hearts and minds. They saw all of these ways in which families like theirs were being portrayed on the news and in the media and by these politicians who have never met them and have never cared to meet them. And they just wanted to speak their truth. They wanted to show how not scary this is, how normal this is. And I loved working with them. I loved getting to tell those stories because, at a time in my life, I would have needed an advocate like that. So it meant something to me to be that advocate for other people. So it meant that, in 2021, 2022, when it came time to write this book, I knew that I could write it because I already had that trust built in. I already knew those families and I'd known them for years. And for the families I did know, I just leaned on them. I asked them, do you know families that have a really great story that have never told that story yet or haven't really told it with the depth, oh my God, with which the depth that you know it, right? That maybe they've been interviewed before, but there's just so much more there. Often as journalists, we kind of really just get to scratch the surface with folks. Like even the stories that I've really loved doing, I only really get 20 minutes with people, right? Because they've got a day to, they've got to live the rest of their day. I have a deadline to meet, right? I don't really get to go into the depths of their heart, everything that they've experienced. I don't get to portray them in their totality. And with this book, I really wanted that. I wanted these kids to get to be seen as full human beings just like everyone else. They've rarely gotten that in their lives. And I just felt like that was a beautiful gift to be able to give them. And in terms of the families, how I chose them, it was just a matter of listening to my heart. I began with 60 pre-interviews with families all across the country in every state that I could find. I was trying desperately to go to Hawaii because I'd never been to Hawaii before, and that just seemed like it'd be a nice thing to do, Vacation to Hawaii, twist my arm, why don't you? But really, I just listened for the stories that I felt like I really connected with. Folks that it just felt like I recognized something of myself in my own story in. I just felt like through those little connections, it was kind of like planting a seed, and that seed could bloom into something beautiful. Just for sort of an example, with the family in Illinois, everybody always assumes that I picked them to be in the book because they're Muslim. And that's kind of true a little bit, but not for the reason that you think. Of course, I wanted to make sure the book was diverse and inclusive and had lots of different kinds of stories. But also, my minor in college was Islamic World Studies, and I finally got to use it, so that felt really cool. It's $150,000 not to waste, so that's really great. But the first time the mom and I spoke over the phone or over Zoom or whatever it was, Maha, I just recognized so much of myself in her. She just really reminded me and reminded me of me, and her relationship with her parents just felt so similar, even though we come from such different backgrounds on paper. When she was speaking, it felt really eerie, sort of to wit. Everybody always assumes in her family that because she's Muslim and has a trans kid, that's sort of the source of drama and trauma in their family. Not so. Her parents have actually been really good about Clint, her son. Initially, they had some sort of hang-ups and misconceptions, but they got over it kind of quick. They worked on it. Every once in a while, they'll use the wrong name or something, and everybody sort of corrects them in unison. But for the most part, they've been pretty good. That said, Maha is a very free-spirited, independent Muslim woman who thinks that she should be able to get to be a Muslim and a woman on her own terms, and will just say very politely that her conservative parents do not agree with this and have never agreed with this, and they'll be fighting about it for the rest of their lives. And for me and my family, I sometimes joke that we fight about everything but me being queer. Everybody in my family is pretty liberal for the most part, except for one aunt in Michigan we're praying for, And so that's not really an issue. That said, two of my family members once got in a very heated fight over a hamburger that lasted for 9 months, and it was such a big deal that they did not speak for 9 months. It was just very I don't want to hear from that bitch for 9 months over a hamburger. So we'll fight about anything else, literally anything but me being queer. And there was just something so refreshing about that. I felt really seen by their story, and I felt other people might feel seen too. And I wanted to give folks that opportunity to feel just reflected in these works. And also, it just, I think, did a really good job of forcing us to question our own preconceptions about trans kids and their families. If you go in with these kinds of assumptions, what their lives are going to be like or what their stories are, each of the stories in this book are just so nuanced and complicated in really beautiful ways. And it forces you to think to yourself how little you know about this, how much you still have to learn. I always say that I want people to come out of this book with more questions than they came in, that I don't really want to answer any questions. What I want is for people to have the right questions. So often we get tripped up on these things that don't matter and aren't important, when we should just be asking, how do we help these kids grow up good? How do we help them have beautiful, full, productive lives and to have the lives that they want? That's the question that I really want all of us to think about. And I'll also say, in terms of the trust part of your question, something that I did is I never assumed I knew what these families' stories were. It wasn't you're going to be the Muslim family, you're going to be this family, you're going to be that family. I asked them what their stories were, and I really deferred to that. The first couple days with me being there would me just be asking the kids, this space is for you, this book is for you. How do you want to use this? What do you want to say? what do you feel like your story is? And they'd never been asked anything like that before. And that just really went a long way with them because it felt like they could trust me. It felt like I was really listening. It felt like I really cared. And I hope that's a model for us going forward, right? To never assume someone's story, to instead allow them the agency to know their own story and to tell their own story holistically and in their own words. I just feel like right now, I often say that there's so much talking about trans kids, but very little talking to trans kids, of just listening to their voices and hearing what they have to say. And with this book, that's really all I wanted. I just wanted to give them a platform and, to me, get out of the way as much as I could.
Wow. You want some water?
I do, actually.
There you
Thank
go.
you so much.
You bet.
He saw me spitting all over the place up here. is what it was.
Just, so how many stops have you had? 107?
175. This is,
Wow.
I've been to 47 of the 50 states. I will be touring for as long, without getting too political, for as long as this guy is in office, just because I can't imagine what else. Thank you.
So, as you've had experiences with audiences and meeting people all over on this journey, are there any moments on the journey that have stuck out to you that you'd like to share about?
Oh God, girl, how much time do you have? I mean, like, this, getting to do, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. You know, people say that writing a book is the hardest thing you'll ever do. I'm like, releasing a book is the hardest thing you'll ever do. Just getting it out into the world, and just like, it's a constant challenge all the time. No one's tweeting this, right? Right? We're all good? Okay. So to talk a little bit of shit for a second, pardon my French, sorry God. But like, there was this time when I was in somewhere in Florida, I won't say whom in case someone can connect the dots. There was a cold front that week, right? And we were supposed to be in this like space that was semi-outdoors, and Floridians do not go out in the cold. And when I got there, I didn't realize it was like a partially outdoor space. And when I get there and I'm like, oh, it's like 50 degrees in here, I literally think to myself immediately, no one's coming to this. Not a single person will show up to this. I was proven wrong. One person showed up. His name is Chris. He's a lovely person. We love Chris. Snaps for Chris, please, for being a champ. He also bought 5 books, so just, you know, be like Chris tonight. He's really a model for all of us. But there were just challenges aplenty. So there was another space going on next door at the exact same time. There was only one microphone, and they got the microphone. So even if I were to have a huge crowd, there was going to be a problem. No one was going to hear me because they were going to hear the people using the microphone. So when only Chris showed up, and I, didn't even have a mic to like talk to him or the invisible people present, I got this beautiful idea. I was going to go to the space next door and literally beg them to let me sell my books there, to like combine our events. I was just like, just give me 15 minutes at the end to talk about the work and like why I'm doing it, and I'll be out of your hair right afterward. And they said yes, and you know what? I sold 15 books, right? So it worked out. Yeah. And it is constantly pushing me. It's constantly pushing me in these ways I just never anticipated. But I've got to say, my world is so much bigger because of this. Like, every week has just brought people into my life that are just so special to me now. And I know people everywhere. Like, when I was in Augusta, deciding how much shit to talk, we'll just say there was a lack of organization a little bit with my event, and I found out the day before that no one had found anywhere for me to stay. And I was like, I am not prepared for this. Okay. But luckily, I now know an amazing pastor in Macon whose name is Arthur, who's one of the best people I've ever met. If you ever have the chance to meet Arthur Villarreal, give him a hug for me. Total sweetie. And such a big flirt. Love that for him. But I literally just called him and I said, hey, Arthur, can you find me somewhere to stay in like Augusta, Georgia? And he was just like, okay, would you like to stay with a reverend or a sweet, adorable gay couple? And I was like, sweet, adorable gay couple, obviously. And like literally within minutes, like I had somewhere to stay. And it just feels so cool to be so connected to community. Like, I feel like that's what we all want in our lives, right? This like chosen family, these people that like tie us to the world and remind us why we're fighting. And I just like, even on the days when this is really hard, and this is really hard sometimes. When I was in Florida, it was so cold there cold by Florida standards. It was 55, guys. It wasn't that bad, right? It was just really hard to get people to come out to our events, and I got really depressed by the end of it because it's just, I know it's not personal, but it's just, it can be really hard to do the work when it feels like you're tossing a tennis ball against the wall, like it just gets really demoralizing really quickly. And I was just like, should I even be doing this? Is this like the best way to do this? Like, should I be like figuring something else out? But I've got to say, Georgia's kicked ass. Like, every event I've done has been amazing. And people have been so cool. And it's just given me such hope for the future of like what's possible when we come together. Like when I was in Macon, Georgia, that was one of my favorite events because, or not in Macon, in Rome, in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, right? We got 70 people out to that event, right? Yeah. And they don't normally have events like this. They don't have events like queer events outside of Pride that get that kind of attendance. And it just felt really special to bring together all of these groups that I felt like could be organizing to do really great things. That it's like this progressive pocket over here and this progressive pocket over, oh my God, this is kind of a tongue twister. Progressive pocket over here and progressive pocket over here, right? I was like, if y'all just built bridges between all of these little islands, imagine the work that you could be doing. And so many people, I saw them just like sharing numbers and being like, how do we work together? How do we do something? How do we organize? And that just felt so cool. And I was just so deeply grateful to be part of it. So I could just, everything, like this has changed my whole life. I'm so grateful. But I gotta say, one of the things that's really stuck out to me again and again is how often parents of trans kids, whose kiddos have just come out, have said, thank you for this book because it was just what they needed to hear, right? That if you, we'll say the first chapter is in South Dakota, right? That if you've got a family of a trans kiddo in South Dakota, even if you love and support and affirm them and being trans doesn't change anything, you worry. You worry about what the world has in store for them. You worry if they'll be safe. You're worried if they'll be okay. And you don't always have families of trans kids like yours to normalize that for you, to say it's possible to do that here, that you can love your kid and be in South Dakota and you guys are gonna be okay. And to see these 7 families of these diverse, states all across the country, these incredibly wide-ranging geographies, and to see that their families are still thriving and surviving through all of this, they just really needed that. I think all right now need to feel less alone. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this book, is that by sharing so much of themselves with us, we all get to feel less alone. And I gotta say, being in these kind of spaces with all of you, I feel a lot less alone. So thank you.
Wow. Amen. Give it a feel. Well, I hope you feel connected with us now, because we want to be connected with you.
Yeah.
And we're really proud of what you've done.
Yeah. Oh, I live here now. I'm moving in.
Oh,
yeah.
right. Yeah.
So this is my bed. You're all in my bedroom now. Congratulations.
So you wrote this in 2022, 23.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this is something a lot of people out here are thinking about. That wasn't long ago. Wasn't long ago, but so much has happened since. And so give you a lot of range here to respond. I mean, would you write it differently with the climate that's in our country now? Or how do you see your book resonating where we are now? Any of that?
Well, I think the sad fact is, and I don't like being an alarmist, it's just not my nature. I think about myself as trying to be a pretty positive, optimistic person. But to be blunt, things are so much worse now. All of the fights that these kids or the battles these kids were fighting on the ground, they're now fighting them tenfold. Because it's what we see in the book is mostly state level fights, right? That it's about Ruby in Texas, fighting against anti-trans legislation being introduced by Texas lawmakers, right? And it's less so at the federal level than more at the state one. But now, it's we've got last year, Texas introduced 1,000 anti-trans bills, by far the most of one state in a single year in the history of this country. And then on top of that, we see everything coming out from this federal administration, the ways in which they're trying to essentially just eradicate the existence of trans people. And it's I know that always feels like overstating the point, but by God, if you can't have health care that affirms who you are. If you can't use the name that you want to in school, if you can't play on a sports team, if you can't dress the way you want, if you can't get a freaking gender-affirming haircut, right? Like, what other conclusion do we come to than the government is trying to make it impossible to be you? And these kids feel that all the time. Trans adults feel like that all the time. A gal I know in Florida who transitioned in the 70s, you know, she said that she now has to get her medications from like south of the border and to smuggle them back like a drug mule, right? And this is a woman who's been out for decades, and she's never been more fearful than she is right now. But I also draw so much hope, you know, that seeing how these kids are still surviving through all of it. Like, you look at Jack in the book, who by far has, I think, the hardest time of anybody, right? To sort of set the scene. She lives in Florida, right? So that's obviously not great already. Her mom is a domestic violence survivor. She has complex PTSD that she'll be dealing with for the rest of her life. Sometimes just getting through a normal day is really hard for June, let alone, you know, battling the political system in Florida as the parent of 2 trans kids. Then on top of that, Jack's younger sibling, Augie, was being tremendously bullied at school. Augie's non-binary. And then Jack, and they were unhoused for 3 months when they were kicked out of a previous living accommodation. They'd literally just gotten into a new apartment when I got there. I'm saying literally a lot, sorry. But our first conversation, I interviewed them on top of a suitcase that I was sitting on, this big Barney purple suitcase. And then if that wasn't enough, Jack was detransitioned by the state of Florida. She was one of the kids who was getting their gender-affirming care through Medicaid, and then Ron DeSantis, in all of his infinite wisdom, decided that trans kids could no longer get their health care that way. So for 5 months, while she waited to turn 18, she had to watch this body that she fought so hard for slip away. And it was a tremendously horrible time. I mean, I have to think to myself that like she was tortured by her own state. You know, what she dealt with was torture. And I wouldn't wish that on an adult, you know, let alone a 17-year-old child. Like, this girl, she would just sit in her room all day with the lights off because she was so worried about catching a glimpse of herself in the mirror, or even, like, you know, looking at her arm. She just worried about what she was becoming or turning into. And then she stopped eating. She got so skinny that her mom worried her heart would stop in her sleep. And she would sit beside her every night as she went to bed in fears that she would have to call the ambulance. And yeah, I mean, that family, they've really been through the ringer. And this might sound almost like counterintuitive, but Jack's actually doing really well now. I just saw her when I was on tour. I hadn't seen her since the book came out, and I probably hugged her like 40 times. She was just like, probably like, get away from me, like, God, weirdo, like, back. And I just I'm very weird about the L word. I've lost a lot of people in my life, so the concept of love means a lot to me. So if I say it to you, that's a really big deal in my life. And I told her I loved her for the first time, because she just means so much to me. And that girl, she's doing so well. And it was just really good to see her doing well. She grew her eyebrows back, which, thank fucking God, pardon my French, but like, that was not working for her, the no eyebrows thing. No, it was very Elizabeth Salander, and I don't say that complimentary. Sorry, Jack. And then on top of that, she moved out of Florida, which, good choice. She's living with her boyfriend. Things are going well. She's waiting for him to propose. And I was like, girl, it's the 21st century. You propose. Never wait for a man. If you take anything away from this, do not wait for a man ever for anything. You will be waiting forever. Yeah. I waited for 1.5 years for my boyfriend to propose, and then I proposed to him because I was sick of his crap, you know? And you know what? We've been married for 10 years, so guess who was right? Thank you. But then on top of that, like, when I was there, I think this comes across in the chapter, when I was there in Florida, I was just so enamored of her. Like, she's just a really smart girl, Jack is. Like, she's so cool, and she has really interesting taste and like in music and books, and she was always making me watch these weird anime movies that I'd never seen, and I had no idea what was going on in any of them. One of them was about a levitating egg, and I think it was a Christian allegory, but like maybe not, who knows? And I would just tell her all the time, like, Jack, what are you gonna do with all this brains and talent? Like, you have so much to offer the world, so what's the plan? Like college, like what colleges are we thinking about? Let's talk through it. And she would always shut me down. She would say that too much optimism had plagued her life and that she didn't want to think about it. And it's like, who wants to hear that a 19-year-old girl is so broken down by the world that she won't let herself think about the future? But she's going to college now. She's going to community college. And that totally surprised me. I was completely gooped. And, you know, she's just getting her prereqs done, or like whatever you call it. And then she plans to transfer to a 4-year college to get her degree in English, so that way she is qualified, as she says, to use big, pretentious words. And I was so proud of her. And I know one day she's going to write her own book, and I'm going to be at her book event. And if you think I'm crying right now, I'm going to blubber like crazy. I once embarrassed the hell out of my husband by watching The Rider with him, which is a very tragic movie about a boy and his horse, on New Year's Day. And I cried so loud in the theater that an usher came in to check in on me. And we'll just say this is going to be way worse than that. And I'm so proud of her. I'm so proud of the kids in this book. I'm so proud to know them. I'm so proud to be part of their family now. Like, these people are my family. When I'm here talking to you about them, I'm talking about my family. I'm fighting for my family. And I'm glad to see them still fighting for themselves. But the thing is, it just shouldn't have to be this hard, you know? Like, it shouldn't have to be this hard to, like, be a person and to grow up good and to have a future. All of this should be innate. You know, when I was a kid, I didn't have to worry about who my lawmakers were. I didn't have to memorize the names of my local leaders. They should just get to be. And I hope that they get that someday. I hope we're able to build that country. And I just think it starts here. It starts with telling these kids stories. It starts with helping them be known. Because I genuinely think that if you humanize people, it makes it a lot harder to dehumanize them. And I just think that's what this country needs more of now, is a little humanity.
Well, one more from me, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. And what you were just saying kind of really resonates, I think, with this last question. So what would you hope the legacy of American Teenager would be in 30, 40, 50 years?
Oh, gosh. Sorry, Mike, South Dakota came out there for a second. Oh, gosh. I think it's really like, if you ever watch old sci-fi movies from the 50s, like what they were doing on the very limited technology they have, like the old Ed Wood movies where they're like, it's like a flying saucer, but it's like on a string and it's just like a paper plate, right? Like, I want this book to be like that, where when we look back on it like 100 years from now, it almost seems silly and ridiculous. You're just like, that's how they lived? Like, when you see the original Star Wars movies, but before Lucas fixed all of the technology to make it look better, like when it's the little like pew-pew lasers, you're like, oh, that's so cute. That's what was technology possible then. I just want this book to be like that. I want it to be a marker of how far we've come. I want people to read this book and it just feels so alien to them, to feel like a different world that luckily they just don't have to deal with anymore. And I think I used to be a little bit more optimistic on that front. I took the election really hard without getting too explicitly political, because I know we are in a church and there are rules about that sort of thing. But, like, frankly, the Trump administration doesn't care about those things anymore, so. Like, we're in a theocracy now, for the love of God. Do what you want. But, like, I'm really bad at guessing things. It's why I never gamble, because I'm terrible at it. And I genuinely thought things were going to go the other direction. And when they didn't, I took it really personally. Like, the day that the returns came in, I was on Slack with my work wife. And I told her, you know, in the morning when it looked like things were going okay and things, you know, might go the other way, I told her that it made me feel really happy, because it made me feel like people had listened. You know, I've been trying to explain to people the consequences of discrimination for such a long time, the consequences of bad policy, the consequences of bad elections. Like, here's what will happen if you vote the wrong way. These are the people that will be impacted. That's one of the big reasons I wrote this book is, you know, the kids and I, we wanted to convince people to go a different direction, to explain to them what they were doing, and they just did that anyway. And I just felt so stupid, you know? And I felt like it was my fault. Like, I felt like if I got the book out earlier, if I just wrote it better, or I interviewed more kids, or, you know, this or that, or I were a better writer, everything would have been different. And then luckily I talked to friends of mine who also felt the same way. They felt like the election was their fault and that they were uniquely responsible. And I was like, oh good, I'm not a narcissist. We're all narcissists. So that made me feel better. But what really helped is that when I finally got back to reporting, I took a couple months off because I just didn't know how to do this anymore. I didn't know how to get out of bed, let alone report again. I interviewed a friend of mine, Chris, who's a really fabulous civil rights attorney. I think I was just saying this to someone earlier. And I asked him what's giving him hope right now, like what's keeping him fighting. He said something to me that will stick with me forever. He said that he knows it's a really hard time, right? It's just a really tough time to be alive. Like they're literally out there shooting people in the face, right? It's hard to consume that and then just decide to like go on with your day as if everything's normal. Like it's profoundly not normal. But what he has to keep in mind is that if you look at the history of the LGBTQ plus legal rights movement, we lost over and over and over and over again before we ever won anything. Like you look at these court cases from the 50s and 60s, and it was just legal loss after loss after loss. And then suddenly things start to change a little bit in like the 80s and 90s. That lays the groundwork for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, for the Edie Windsor decision, for the Obergefell decision of the Supreme Court, for Bostock versus Clayton County, the non-discrimination ruling. And suddenly we were winning so much that it kind of just felt like we would win forever. And I think we're all learning the hard lesson that rights once granted to you can be taken away. But I think what I have to remember is that you can lose for a long time, but suddenly you win, right? If you just keep going, if you just keep believing, if you just keep hoping. So I hope the legacy of this book is hope, that we hoped for a better future and we got there because we never gave up. And seeing all of you here and not giving up on these kids and my family, it just means so much to me. I get so mad at allies sometimes, right? That I have empathy for everybody. I understand we're all doing our best, right? But sometimes you'll have these people that just decide to kind of peace out, right? They're like, oh, it's just too hard and I'm not gonna engage and I'll see you in like 2028. And we need people on the ground. We need people showing up. It meant so much to me in LA to see all the people showing up to the No Kings rally, because there was this woman I know who is an arepa vendor who I just loved, because she gave me free arepas all the time, which is terrible business practice, right? I was like, lady, you got money to send to your family in Venezuela. Why are you giving me free food? Like, you need this money. But she was just this sweet, sweet old woman, and I saw her being loaded into a van, into one of the ICE vans when they were doing the raids there, because they got to our ICE raids early. And it just broke my heart because I don't know where she is or how she's doing. I don't know if her family knows where she is. And to see people out there in the streets fighting for her, right? People that don't know are never going to have the chance to meet her. It meant so much to me. So I hope, that we see a little bit more of that for everybody, right? To other groups who need us, for trans kids, for women's reproductive rights, for the reproductive rights of all people, right? There are so many people who need our advocacy right now. So I hope this book inspires people to action. I hope it inspires us to get out there. I hope it reminds us who we're fighting for, that we can't ever take these kids out of our mind's eye. I just hope these kids just don't feel like they're forgotten. If I could give them anything, it's that they feel like their stories matter at the end of all this. They feel like people are listening. And I'm just so glad that, for the past 16 months, I've gotten to see people listening. I've gotten to see people carrying their stories forward. It gives me hope again, and I'm just tremendously grateful for that.
We recently had a worship service where we highlighted the musical Suffs that was on Broadway about the women's suffrage movement. And again, had no idea. I knew it was hard, difficult, but not what they suffered, what people went through. And I think even though your book, we hope, will look silly one day to everybody, though it'll be important that they remember what people went through. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. All right. Let's hear from you. August, you got a microphone. You can get out there for folks. There's
awesome. All right.
So I had an opportunity. I'm Naomi Simmons, and my child is London. I had an opportunity to step up and meet Nico. A lot of people don't know, but we're one of the 4 families that actually sued the state of Georgia for gender-affirming care for minors. We won that case, and then within 24 hours, thank you. And then within 24 hours, they shot it down. One of the biggest things that I think would be very important is to see books like yours not be featured just on an LGBTQ, corridor in the library or in the bookstore, but on a mainstream sort of platform, so that more families that either have never ever met a transgender girl, actually realize that it's not just about the title, they're humans and children that need advocacy and support. So I just want to say thank you for writing the book. I really would hope that more people would actually step up and tell their story.
Hi, my name is Ann Bishop, and I have a trans daughter and a queer daughter, and I'm very proud of them. Did you find any experiences where the children told you things that maybe the parents had no idea that they were feeling that way, or were there some revelations that the parents thought they heard everything they needed to know, but they really were surprised?
Yeah, okay, so we have this little tour tradition that every time I get a new question that I've never gotten before, we snap for the new question. So, snaps for new question. I'm like 175 stops and you can still get asked new things. So, thanks for that. That's a really great question. That did come up sometimes. It was really interesting in the West Virginia chapter. The mom, Dawn, and her kiddo, Micah, who's a black gender fluid teenager, had such different conceptions of reality and the things that they'd been through that I actually found it really hard to negotiate that in the text. Like, how do you sort of like present these things alongside each other and not pick a side too much, And I think you're just finding out so much on the ground about how these kids see their lives versus how their parents see their lives. And it's not always the same. It doesn't always sync up. In the last chapter in California, the mom, Janet, actually thanked me after she read the book because she felt like she got to know her daughter better. We all know teenagers, right? They're sometimes lovely and wonderful, and sometimes they're little shits and you want to slap them, right? And by that, we love and affirm each of you. She'd sort of gone through that teenagery period, right? Of being a little sullen and bratty and keeping to herself sort of thing, where it's like, Mom, get out of my room sort of thing. And they just didn't have that same closeness that they once did, just because she's sort of going through that phase. There was just so much about her life that she just feel like she didn't really have access to because Kylie just wasn't giving her that. So being able to read this book and find out about, Kylie's hopes and fears, her friends at school, what was going on, all these things that, when she asked, how was your day? She's like, fine, that sort of thing. Finally, she gets to sort of have her daughter open up to her, but in this kind of roundabout way. It just felt really good, and it's brought them a lot closer. It's really helped their relationship a lot, because it was kind of like Kylie was giving her permission to read her diary, right? She was giving herself permission to be really honest with her and be really vulnerable. And it just makes me wish that every kiddo had this. It really sucks that I guess it would be horrible if a journalist had to go to the home of every family in the country to teach people to see them as human. So I don't really want that. But it's I think what this illustrated to me was the importance of resources, of support, of advocacy, of even mental health resources. So many of the kids in this book, it was really helpful for them to get to talk through all this stuff with somebody. Because, let's say the Florida family, right? You've got, again, that's Jack, her younger sibling Augie, and then their mom June. They didn't talk about this stuff with each other because they're all going through it together. They're all suffering together and processing this together and working through their trauma together. So they just don't have that critical distance to to really help each other when they're just trying to survive themselves. So having that really neutral person in the house to bounce this stuff off of, to talk about things with, to open up about things that they've never had the chance to talk about with anybody, just really, really, really helped. And I think the sad fact is, a lot of kiddos just don't have those resources. They don't have the resources to see a counselor or a trusted adult outside the home. When they were passing the medical care ban in Montana, the Democrats there tried to pass a rider, or whatever you call it, an amendment that would mandate greater funding for mental health resources for kids who are being forced to wait until they were 18, because it's like, okay, well, if you want them to wait, let's make sure they get to 18. That got voted down. And it's gotten voted down every single time they've tried that. So I just hope that, you know, like this conversation, what we're talking about here, is a reminder to do that for each other. You know, if we know families who are going through it, like parents who are dealing with this, kids who are dealing with this, right? Like, ask how you can, like, be of service. Like, ask how they need help. I think we sometimes wait for other people to come to us, right? We're like, oh, you just reach out if you ever need me, right? But being really proactive in other people's lives can be so beneficial, because we just don't always know what's going on with other people unless we ask. You know, even with the parents in this book, they didn't always know what was going on with their kids. So just being that person, that resource to other people, so that way they have somebody to open up to. Like, I just think that that's so critical right now. And I think we all need that. So just be that for someone.
Thank you. Well, I know you want to sell it, Kathy Hodges. I know you want to sell books, so I'm not going to say out loud that I listened to your book and it's a really wonderful way to consume it. I won't mention that.
No, don't.
But I'm a retired counselor who worked with kids my whole career, and my LGBTQ kids that I worked with did not always have the experience of having such supportive parents. And I'm wondering if, you know, when I listened to your book and all these families were so supportive, is that more the norm? Did you intentionally just choose kids who are living in supportive families? What about the other side?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it wasn't that I was trying to sort of highlight any one particular experience. Like, I wanted experiences that were as different as I could possibly manage. But the fact is that, you know, the being told that the book wasn't realistic by the publisher because none of the families rejected their kids, I just thought that was so ridiculous, because it was like, honey, sweetie, baby, darling, diva. Like, who's gonna let me in their house for 2.5 weeks to talk about what bad parents they are? You know, and I'm also a really empathetic person. So I just felt like in the text I would almost be trying to implicitly make excuses for them in order to sort of understand their behavior. And I just didn't want trans kids or queer kids to take the wrong message from this book. I didn't want it to feel like I'm justifying any kind of like emotional or even physical abuse against them. So it's just like, I just didn't feel like I was the right person to write that story. And I just didn't feel like with the tone of this book, it would fit in the way that I needed it to. It just felt like it would be all wrong. I do think that those stories are really important. And in the project I'm working on right now, that you'll know about it when it comes out, I am finding a new way to sort of get at that, but by kind of letting people tell their own stories, right? By sort of not being an intermediary at all, and just like letting them tell their stories in their own words, like stories of resilience and survival and how we build found families when we don't have that support at home. Because I think everybody in this audience, we either have that story for ourselves, right? If you're, you know, a part of the LGBTQ+ community, or you know somebody who does. But I think for me, what really ended up sticking out to me as I was going through that selection process were families that represented stories that I'd never heard before, stories that I really wanted to hear. Like that story of rejection, I know it's important and I know it's critical and I don't want to be flip or dismissive, but we've heard that. We know that story. We've heard that story over and over and over again, and it keeps a lot of us from coming out. Like one of the first books that I read when I came out as queer in high school, I first came out as queer and then non-binary in college because that just wasn't an option for me. I didn't know that was a thing I could be. I read this book called Prayers for Bobby, which is a really lovely book. I don't mean to throw shade at it. It's really well done. It's about a woman who became a PFLAG mom after she lost her gay son to suicide. And initially she was quite rejecting of him because of her faith background, and it's about really how after losing him, she goes through this entire sort of transformation process and becomes a vocal advocate for queer kids. And I think that story is beautiful. I think people need to hear that story, but that was kind of the only story I heard. It was versions of that. It was the death story. It was the trauma story. And when you hear that over and over and over again, you start to think that that's the only story that exists. You start to think that nothing else out there is possible for you. Like, I remember that even a friend of mine in high school who was very supportive of me and was very lovely, we were filling up at like the gas station, right? She was like giving me a ride home. And she was expressing, I love you unconditionally, da, 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 da. But it's just such a lonely life, right? Because she'd never been told that any other thing, right? That was the only message she'd gotten. And with this book, I just felt so grateful to tell trans kids other things, to tell them that they deserve love and they should be loved, that they're like the embodiment of God's gift, right? That they are part of the divine plan. That felt really cool. Like in the 4th chapter that takes place in Texas, that centers an Episcopal family there. So the kiddo is Ruby, she's 19 at the time. Her parents are Molly and Ryan. And Ruby's lucky in a lot of ways. Her parents figured out that she was trans at a really young age, and they educated themselves. They did their homework. They read like every book, so that way if she did come out, they could be like, okay, we got you, girl, so that, she wouldn't have to educate them. They'd already be educated. And I think a lot of us in the room, we understand that that's not just unique and wonderful because her parents affirmed her, but because they were willing to do the work themselves. So often in our lives as queer people, we have to educate everybody around us. We're having to explain this stuff again and again and again, coming out again and again and again to get people up to speed. She didn't have to do that. And on top of it, she had this boyfriend, this guy in her class that she'd been flirting with for like months. They'd been flirting shamelessly, and it was kind of like, get it over with, Jesus Christ, just ask each other out. And he finally got up to the courage to do it 2 days before I got there, and I got to see them fall in love. And just seeing that up close and getting the chance to document that just felt really big. Because like trans kids don't get told that often enough, that they're deserving of not just like familial love and community love or friend love, but also romantic love. Lifting that up felt incredible. She did dump him because she realized she was a lesbian, but before that, it was really lovely, So just, excuse that part of it. But then on top of it, one of the reasons they wanted to be in the book is because of their church. They go to a progressive Episcopal church in Houston that threw Ruby a coming out party after she came out as trans, a renaming liturgy, where they take your confirmation certificate, they destroy it, and they give you a new one with your name on it. And it's this idea of discarding the person that everyone thought you were in the favor of the person God intended you to be. And I would love to see lots more people do that sort of thing. Being very subtle up here. But, yeah.
Nico,
but just seeing people get that and uplifting that, I just never heard that before. I didn't know that existed. And getting to tell trans kids that does exist and that's out there, that felt so much bigger to me. And that felt so much more important than reaffirming that bad, sad shame story, right? We've got so much of that. And I just wanted to give people hope. I wanted, if you're having a bad day or you're seeing all this happening in the news of literally, again, ICE shooting people in the face, you can read this book and you can see how much these kids have gone through, but you can see all the love around it too. Like, I never played things down. I never sugarcoated things of made it sound easier. I was real, I was real about trauma. And here's the thing about trauma though, what gets us through it? Love. And I just made sure that was always center. I made sure that that's the thing that people came away with, right? Because it reminds us to put more love in the world, because that's how we all survive.
August, could you maybe be in the center and could get people on the...
I'm really glad you brought up Ruby's story, Nico. Were there any other stories that were like that in a way that the kids had spiritual practices or creative activities that supported them?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So we've got 3 families of faith in the book. One have sort of, with a broad brush, a kind of more negative story of being kicked out of the church after their kiddo came out as trans. We've got Ruby's story, obviously theirs is a pretty uniquely positive one. Molly, her mom said something really interesting to me, that when the first time I called them to talk about maybe being in the book, She said that journalists often call to tell them about their story, or to ask about their story, because they've heard that there's a family in Houston that has a trans kid that's religious, and they sort of want to dig into that. But when they find out that Ruby's had a good story, right, that her church got it right, and that they've just lifted her up and loved her and accepted her, they don't want to tell that story. They only want to tell the story of like brokenness and trauma and pain. So getting to tell that just feels so cool. And I love that for the Muslim family, getting to tell this really nuanced story where, Clint, when he came out as trans, we talk about that he used to worship in like the women's section in church because it's gender, or not, in the mosque, it's gender segregated, right? And when he came out, he's now started worshiping with the guys in the men's section. And it's not like they've been like through like waving the pride flag or anything, but just no one said anything about it, And for them, that's a win. They're not going to correct people. They're not going to be like, are you sure? Checking. They're just going to be like, okay, cool, not looking to get gift horse in the mouth. And it's felt really lovely to kind of, as I said before, get to check people's assumptions a little bit, right? That if you're like a Muslim kiddo, that you can't have that, or that's not possible for you. Because I think it shows us that those stories are out there. We just haven't taken the time to tell them. And I really hope, in a perfect world, I hope that this book inspires more storytelling in that lens. Like, there are so many stories of people who are queer and are religious and have stories of and lives where they've gotten to feel uplifted by their faith, to feel uplifted by their like fellow congregants. Most of the events that I've been doing on the tour are in churches, right? So I've gotten to experience that community firsthand. I'm literally seeing it now. There are 70 of you guys here, right? If you all hated me, I don't think you'd be here, right? But we just don't get to see that often enough. So I hope that in our communities, in our storytelling, in our literature, in our media, we do more to just challenge that narrative, to say that that one political party doesn't own God, they don't own church, they don't own faith, that faith is inclusive, faith is love. There are all kinds of ways to worship. It's not just one thing, and we just need to hear about that more.
Hi, my name's Penny Langley, and I'm married to a trans man. He did not come out until he was 49 years old. We were together for 3 years before he even came out to me, and he was terrified that that was going to change our relationship, because for so many people it does, right? So we've been together 15 years now.
Congratulations.
Thank you. In fact, our anniversary our 15 is coming up. What's today? Oh, it's today. Whoopsie. Anyway.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I think my comment is mostly, I'm so glad that this kind of resource exists now, because he waited so long to come out because he had no idea what transgender even was when he was growing up. He identified as a lesbian growing up. So the fact that we have come so far in such a relatively short amount of time with transgender acceptance, and now it seems to be turning back, like I've never been so scared for him as I am right now in this administration. It's really hard. He's lost his gender-affirming care because we actually live in South Carolina, and they withdrew, the doctor that he was seeing for his HRT withdrew care at the end of 2024 because they knew what was coming and that they wouldn't receive funding anymore if they provided HRT. So he's had a pretty big emotional backslide. So I'm really super glad that this exists for the teenagers now so that they do have that hope. On the other hand, do you ever think about writing about those folks that did come out so late in life and are now facing this sort of setback? You know, they've finally gotten comfortable and they've chosen the life that they were supposed to be living in all this time, and now they're having these big setbacks right now. Has that been something you've considered? Because I know that he would benefit from it greatly.
So I would just say, you're scooping me right now. Wait for my next book. Although if you steal that idea, I'm coming after you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Rosanna Horton. I am the second vice chair of the Democratic Party of Chatham County.
Oh, hey.
Yay!
Yeah. We
Yeah.
were emailing.
Yeah.
So nice to see you.
Thank you. We're working very, 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 very hard, and I'm grateful for that. And I don't know if you've gone to Northern California. I'm from San Francisco, but I have many friends in San Francisco and in Marin, which is north of that. So connect with me, and I can set you up for stuff.
I've been there 4 times. I'd go again.
Woo!
Love San Francisco.
The other thing is so my friend, she's my mentor, has a child who's trans and wants to send Anya to Spain because of the fear of what's going on. Have you had other trans who are going out of the country to be safe?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. And I would actually say it's interesting you mentioned Spain because I feel like that's become a very common destination for folks because I think it depends on how you look, but it's widely seen as the most LGBTQ plus affirming country in the world. Like it's between like that, Iceland and New Zealand. So, you know, pretty much you pick one of those things. But one of the sort of problematic things about going to Iceland and New Zealand is it's harder to move there. So Spain has slightly more lax immigration policies. It's more open to sort of things like the digital nomad visa and things like that. It's not burdensomely expensive as some other countries are, even though it's definitely not cheap. So for folks who feel like they have no choice to get out, I know a lot of families who have gone there or gone to South America. A family I know went to Uruguay. I know folks who have gone to Costa Rica. Here's the thing, though, it's not a foolproof plan. Like a woman that I know, the creator of the Trans Pride flag, Monica, she and her wife have to move back. They moved to Costa Rica. They just posted on Facebook today that they can't stay any longer because they can't find jobs, right? Like, I think she or her wife got like an offer from the CDC to continue working there, so they have to move back to do that because otherwise they just can't survive. And I'm hearing those kinds of stories again and again. Like I know a family who went to the UK very briefly. I'd sort of kind of tried to warn them that the UK's immigration policies are really harsh and they're very difficult. But they just were so dead set on it that it was like, all right, hoping for the best. I think they lasted for like 72 hours before they realized like what they'd done and like came back. It was an absolute disaster. And I'm just seeing that again and again. And I think what I hope, this might be like preaching to the choir, but I think what I hope to see like queer nonprofits do is like supporting folks like in that work. Like in Canada, they have Rainbow Railroad, right, that helps people seek asylum from other countries to come to the US. And that resource is incredibly important, but what I'm actually talking to their executive director or former executive director about is how do we help people who are doing the opposite? How do we help political refugees flee from this country and to be set up in another place so that way they don't have to do this on their own and find out they get there and have no resources and can't survive and have to come back. One of the kids from the book had to do that. Ruby ended up going to France for a while, but she was just completely alone there. She didn't have anybody. She decided to go to college there or go abroad, and it was just not a great situation for her. None of her credits transferred, right? She didn't speak French until like 3 months before she left, and she did one of those intensive programs, right? And all the students there, she didn't know anybody. She didn't know an entire soul in the country, in this place she'd never even been before. And suddenly it's like, surprise, this is your new home. It was just a lot to take in, and she was really depressed and didn't have anybody to really lean on there. Of course, she and her mom are still really, really close, but there's a difference between like having a shoulder to cry on over Zoom and like having someone who is physically present for you on having a bad day. So I hope that we build the real infrastructure for people who need to make these really hard decisions because they can't do it on their own. And they're being forced to do it on their own right now and really suffering the consequences. So thank you for that question.
Hey, so my name is CJ, and hi.
Oh, hey. Hey, CJ.
So I wear 2 hats. I'm going to say that I'm not going to wear my voter registration board member hat so I don't get in trouble. But I'm going to wear my voter advocacy hat because, first of all, I want to brag that we have one of the queerest canvassing teams in the region, and that is on purpose because we need to get out into the community, and a lot of people don't know that I'm actually queer too, and I'm non-binary and happy to tell you all, hey, this is who I am. But it's not about me. I wanted to know, because we have a lot of younger, apathetic voters that do not care about political parties, but they care about the issues. And you're welcome. And what is the single most important event that we could do or process to approach voters to get them to see, number one, trans kids or just trans people as people first? And is there an event that you would recommend that we need to implement?
Thank you. That's a great question. Also, that's another new question for the evening. Can we snap for new question? Y'all are killing it. Love this. I would say, so I think the three most important words in the English language are I don't know. So I'm going to say I don't know and then try to offer my gobbledygook expertise on the subject. And that I think something that I've seen folks occasionally do really well is to sort of bring trans kids together for almost like a panel, right? Or people who work with trans kids, or parents of trans kids who still feel like they can like speak out, right? To sort of allow the community to be informed by their voices and their perspectives. Because still so many people don't know what these kids go through or what they're going through right now. We get sort of siloed in our own like media environments, and I think it's so wild how often like really well-meaning allies, you know, and people who, you know, don't, it's not like they're like trying to be like not informed, they're just not getting this information, won't know about people fleeing the country and won't know about these laws and policies that are being passed because they're just not hearing about it. So I think having like panels and info sessions like in like town halls, right? Something like this, but you allow people from the community to speak, I think would be really important, and just for like informing people. And also, you know, we know what we know and we don't know what we don't know, right? So for folks, it can just be so valuable to hear other experiences, hear other people's experiences right now, and hear what they're going through. It can be really eye-opening, because I just think that we're hearing so much about just, you know, the news and things that are happening, but we don't often hear about how it affects people on the ground. We don't often hear about like what people's coping mechanisms are, how they're getting through all of this. So I think the more that we can do that to, you know, make these things personal for us, to make them more human, to show how it's impacting members of our community, and allowing that to motivate people's like fight, allowing that to, you know, to really inform people, I think it can do a lot of good. So that would be my idea. I'm pro town hall. Yes, town halls, baby.
Hi, I'm Barbara Gooby. I'm proud to say I'm a member of this congregation. I'm also a member of the Democratic Party, and I'm running for Georgia State Senate. So, yeah. And one of the reasons is the laws that are being passed and have been passed against trans people, against women, against gay people in Georgia, and it's just a crime. And I want to thank you for writing the book in the way that you said you have. And the first commenter, London's mom, hey, said that she thought it would be good not to just have it in the LGBTQ area, and I think that's so important, because today people need to be heard the way you heard them, to be listened to, and their stories told the way you told them. So I want to thank you very much for that. I do have another comment for your Michigan aunt. Down here, we say, bless her heart.
She would hate that, and I love that so much.
But is there anything about your story that's that you would like to talk about, or that's different from what was in the book? I think, and I think one of the things that you give is not only the chance for LGBTQ kids to know that they are loved and that they can exist, but they have the opportunity to grow up and be in a loving relationship. Yeah. So.
No, thank you. Thanks for that question. I think I would just say that I think people often feel like that if you're a journalist or like a nonfiction writer, and maybe even a fiction writer, right? If you're writing a story that isn't your own, you're writing your story in some way, right? And I feel like I'm not doing that as much, that I'm trying very hard to give other people platform and to sort of de-center myself. Like I had the ability just as like an essayist to tell my story for a really long time. And frankly, I got sick of myself. I got sick of my own voice, you know? I was so tired of my problems. I'm just like, you know, this is what therapy's for. People don't need to hear all this. And I wanted other people to have that platform. I wanted them to feel heard. I wanted them to experience like what it felt like to get to say their piece. It can be really healing. It can feel really good to share the deepest, darkest crap that's ever happened to you, and for people to say, I see you, or even I relate to you in some way. And I think for me, what's beautiful about this book is it represents a childhood I didn't get to have. Like I was out as queer, but I didn't find being non-binary until like college, right? And I imposter syndromed myself out of it for years. Because I, you know, God, I think I was probably like a sophomore, junior in college when the concept of being like genderqueer was introduced to me. But not to be offensive to anyone, I did not like that word. That does not resonate with me. It sounds too Tumblr for my taste, you know? And I just also felt like I just wasn't trans enough or queer enough, like because I just wasn't doing enough to like, you know, like experiment with like nails and makeup and like gender and like all this stuff. I'm lazy, you know? Like me, like this is what I do. This is the best you're gonna get, you know what I mean? So it's just like, I just felt like I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve that label. I couldn't just like, to claim that and claim I had the experience of people who were so much more marginalized than I was. But then, you know, when it came during the pandemic and I was reporting on, you know, these anti-trans laws and anti-trans bills so often, it was really getting to me. Like it was really starting to like screw with me mentally. And I felt like it was important to say why. So I came out really quickly as non-binary. Like I told my husband, he was cool with it. He's like the best person I've ever met in my whole life, except for all of you. You're better. Please buy a book. So aside from present company, he's my favorite person in the whole world. And I told literally the world like the next day. I just like put it on Facebook so that way I couldn't chicken out, right? And I was just like texting friends to be like, by the way, I'm non-binary. And it felt really good, but it took me so long to get to that point. It took me so long to get to that space where it felt okay and it felt like something I could claim and that I could work through my own like BS enough to be visible and to feel seen. And it's been one of the best things I've ever gotten to do for myself. I feel like in some ways I've only really gotten to be me in like the past five years, that I've really only like come into the fullness of my own identity. That was a gift that I had to give to me. And I just feel like for those other like queer and trans adults who didn't get that experience, reading this and reading those stories can feel really healing, to know that someone got this thing that you don't or didn't. I had the chance to go to a queer summer camp for kids in West Virginia several years ago. I grew up in sort of the tip of like Appalachia, right? And it was called the Appalachian Queer Youth Summit. And to see trans kids and queer kids get this space I didn't even know existed or could exist, and I could have never even imagined for myself. It's one of the best experiences of my life. It was incredible. Just being there, I was so like boundlessly happy for them. And I felt the same doing this book. Just being with these kids and seeing how far we'd come, that they had that self-knowledge. They had a self-knowledge that I didn't possess. I feel like their biggest cheerleader forever. I'm just so in awe of them and indebted to them, and I'll just carry their stories forward forever.
Hi, my name is London, and I wanted to come on here and ask a question and also make a comment. I'm so thankful for all of you grown-ups to come here and support kids like me. And also, I wanted to ask you, what are the difficulties, like the kids that you talked to, what are the difficulties they had in school?
Oh, sure. That's a great question. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question, if this is okay. Because sometimes people have these really like weird things that they want to know about like trans people, right, that are like none of their business. But every time I meet another trans or non-binary person, I want to know, what were the other names that you thought of but didn't go with? For a long time, I road tested a lot of names that did not stick.
I made it up when I was 6. It was either London or Claire Muffy's Binkelbean.
Okay, wow. So, I'd make you spell that like a spelling bee, but we don't have time for that. Thank you. Thanks so much for what's the word? There's a word. What's that? Yeah, I was going to say entertaining me, but indulging is even better. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends. Like some of the kids had really good school environments, right? Where like in Torrance, which is like an LA suburb, it does not like to be called an LA suburb, but in my opinion, a suburb it is. The kiddo who goes to that school, Torrance High School, she said that like 25% of the student population was queer. Like the GSA there is so big that the kids can't meet all at the same time. They have to essentially pick shifts. Like these kids get to go this week, these kids get to go this week. And when they do have the sort of like bigger group meetings once a month, they have to meet in the auditorium because there are so many kids. And that just feels like unbelievable to me. When I was in school, there was one other out person, and we had a very like toxic like frenemyship. It was like wild stuff. Like, yeah, Donna Tartt novels could be written about it. But for some of the other kids, you see how hard they have to fight for like inclusive spaces or to just be able to be themselves in school. Like you look at Ridian in Alabama, they ended up transferring to a school we'll talk about in a second, but their old school was tremendously unaffirming. They were bullied really badly. The other students would punch them in the halls in front of teachers, and teachers wouldn't intervene. Ridian was terrified to use the bathroom. He would just hold it all day and run home at the end of the day, developing very frequent UTIs as a result. And he would just wear these giant hooded sweatshirts in hopes of just kind of being invisible and that like no one else would see him. And at his new school, he got to go to this school called the Magic City Acceptance Academy, which is in the outskirts of Birmingham, Alabama. It is one of the only two explicitly LGBT plus affirming schools in the entire South. It's literally in the charter, right? Like he just got to be himself, and it made such a profound difference in his life. Like he went from being that shy, fearful kid who would never go out of his way to like make a new friend or to speak up in class, to being like the most popular kid in school. Like when he would walk in, from the weekend, everyone would yell like, "Hey, Ridian, how was your weekend?" And then when they would sit down for lunch, everybody would pull their lunch trays aside in hopes that he would sit down there. And I was just so in awe of that because I deeply wanted to be popular when I was in middle school and was absolutely terrible at it. Like the more I wanted to be liked, the more I would be bullied because of it. So it was a horrible feedback loop. But for me, I was just not surprised because he was so cool. Like he'd gotten to become this really outgoing, gregarious, funny person because he'd had this space to develop into that guy, and that old guy, like I just didn't recognize him anymore. He just wasn't that anymore. And I was so deeply happy for him, but it kind of hurt my heart a little bit, if I'm honest, knowing that every kid doesn't get that. Like for some of the other kids in the book, you see how much they struggle in school. You see how they struggle with few resources. Like Wyatt in South Dakota, he's counting down the days before he gets to leave. And it's just really that, he has this small little group of friends, and it's not even that everybody's transphobic or something. It's just that he just doesn't identify with them. He doesn't feel like they're his people here. And he just desperately longs to be known, to be loved, to be seen, to feel part of a community. He's now gotten that in college, but to be able to get that in high school would have just meant a lot to him. And I think for me, it gets down to resources. That all of the kids that are doing well in this book, whether that's in school or somewhere else, have resources at their disposal. There are non-discrimination policies. There are teachers that they can go to. There are safe spaces. The ones that aren't doing well don't have that. So if we want kids to do well, we have to create those spaces. if they don't exist in school, having a space like this, the Savannah Pride folks, like that you all are creating, that's critical. Having a space like this, like an affirming church, that's amazing. And I just hope that we all do whatever we can to create those spaces. If they do exist, make more of them. If they're there, double down. If they are there, make sure that you're doing the advertising that people know about them. Because you might feel like you're shouting from the rooftops, but the sad fact, people don't always know about the good work that's being done. They're not necessarily connected to it. So make sure the word is getting out. Make sure we're telling people. Because for these kids, I got to see it like up close. It makes a world of difference. It really is the difference between some folks. It's a matter of like life and death.
One last question, and then I've got one right here who's been having a hand up. And then you're going to hang out a little bit, right? If somebody has a burning question on their heart, they could talk with you about. Okay, good. And don't forget to talk about the books, because you can actually you can sign them for them.
I've got a whole spiel.
It's just been very interesting to listen to you. I'm Wayne Welch. I'm a social worker. Been in this community since back in the 70s. I'm 86 years old, still working as a clinical social worker. I've learned in my experience, and actually I learned from a priest who said to me one time, you don't remove from the mind with the reason what reason did not put there. And in therapy, in my own therapy with clients and my own experience of being in treatment, I found that being in a psychodynamic situation, I learned because I lose my ego. Yeah. And I think one of the wonderful places about this congregation is of the dramas that we put on. Because in a drama, you can lose yourself in the story. Jesus didn't write the Bible. He told the Bible in stories, and we learn through getting ourselves incorporated into the story. Yeah. And I think your book, if we could take some of those stories, turn them into dramas, and put them on, it would be powerful. Yeah. And I would encourage us to consider something of that sort.
Absolutely. Thank you. You have adaptation rights. It's all yours.
Okay. I'm sorry, somebody did have their hand up there too a while back too, so let's be sure. Thank you, Wayne.
Hello, I'm Tiffany Tipton. I am an advocate for all people who are victims and survivors of domestic and family violence. I've also been working this week, which I thought was the theme when I came. It's a Teen Violence Dating Week. And so now I have a book for trans teenagers that I can talk to, but I am struggling to find words for these precious children who are trans teenagers experiencing violence, who are ashamed to tell, they don't want to tell their parents, or as a former 25-year high school teacher who had a counselor who would pull her own children out of gay teachers' classes, who just ignored them. I have a book. Give me some words. I'm also a mother of a gay son, and I'm a member of Savannah Invisible. I'm a member of Stand in Pride, and because of Stand in Pride, I'm now another mother of a son who is gay.
Thank you. I would say, okay, so this is slightly blue language, so you might want to clean this up a little bit. But I've become a really big fan of thriving out of spite, of having a great, wonderful, lovely life in spite of everybody who told you you couldn't, in spite of everybody who told you that wasn't possible for you. So here's what I say to anybody who's like experiencing discrimination or just doesn't feel like they can be themselves, or just is waiting for that point in which they can finally like live their truest self. Fuck them, you know? Like, you're gonna meet so many assholes along the way. So many people who deny your right to be you, don't believe that you can be you, doesn't think that God wants to be you. And only you know your story. Only you know who you're supposed to be. So listen to yourself. Like, all of those people who think that they know you better than you, that's not true. You are your own best advocate. You're your own best fighter. And you just have to keep fighting for yourself. And you have to keep fighting for that voice and trusting that voice. Because like at the end of the day, like when you are this fabulous queer adult who has this incredible life and, you know, a kick-ass partner, if that's something that you aspire to, and like a good job and friends that you love, you'll feel so grateful for making it through. You'll feel so grateful for like, you know, for having a bad day and getting up the next day and doing it again, and getting up the next day doing it again. It's not that, you know, there used to be this sort of it gets better sort of thing. And, you know, that resonates with me a little bit. But I also think, you know, we make it better. We make it better by fighting for ourselves, by fighting for each other, by never, ever, ever giving up. Like, I loved at this Super Bowl that Bad Bunny, you know, said that thing that he was like, he said that thing. He said that, you know, he was there because he believed in himself, and you should believe in yourself too. And I just think that that is such a beautiful, important message for all of us. So please carry that forward. Like, he believed in himself. You should believe in yourself too.
So don't forget about the table, the center table over here. Talk about selling books. Where will you be down here? Okay, and then August will give us a benediction. How about that?
I like that you tell me about selling my books. Like I'm not going to do that already. I'm like the least shy person you'll ever meet. So I'm going to tell you tonight not to just buy one book, although obviously you should buy one book. You should buy many books. People often ask me like how we get these stories out to community members who are never going to show up for something like this, who need to hear this message but just aren't going to be present either because they're scared or because they're sort of outside the bubble, right? But people whose hearts could be changed, people whose minds could be changed. And I say that that's a great question, but I rely on other people to do that for me a little bit. You can ask August. I promote the heck out of these events. If there is somebody who is has a pulse in Savannah, they have been emailed by me. I've even heard from a couple people in the audience that they came because of one of my emails. But I don't have the ability to force people to show up. What if I could, right? But like everybody who's shown up has chosen to be here. So for you folks, I ask you to carry these stories forward. Be my disciples a little bit. Think of those people in your life who could use a book like this. People like that one aunt in Michigan who could really use a copy of this. She did get one. Who knows if she read it or not. But, I've been able to see firsthand that these stories do change minds. They move mountains when we just give it a push. There was this woman that I stayed with in Montana who gave a copy to her neighbor who used to be profoundly transphobic, and not because she's like a bad person or something. She's very lovely. I got to meet her when I was there. Is that she didn't know anybody, right? And because of that, she just got tripped up on the stuff that doesn't matter, these sort of like worst case scenarios and what ifs. And then she read this book and she got to know these kids and she saw how little any of that was really important. It was just about loving these kids and wanting the best for them, wanting to have them to have good lives that they sort of decided and determined for themselves. And since this book came out, since she read it, she started writing letters of support for gender-affirming care for adults, which in Montana, that means a lot. She's a therapist there, and there just aren't a lot of things like that. And seeing that happen, it just makes me wonder what else will bloom if we plant seeds. That's what I feel like I'm doing out here. I said before that I've done 175 book stops. My goal is a little under 600 is I think what I've mapped out. I will literally be traveling through November 2028 because I have to plant as many seeds as possible. I have to see what they can bloom into. And I rely on you to help me a little bit. So please plant some seeds. Help me plant some. There was a woman in Atlanta that I bullied, and by that I mean I talked to her nicely until she bought 10 books, and I don't know what she's going to do with all of them, but that is not my business. And again, I just really wanted to affirm that you coming here, you even doing this little bit of seed planting here, this means so much. So give yourself credit for that. Thank yourself for this. You're already doing the work, and that means so much. I'm so grateful, and I'll be even more grateful if you buy 10 books. If you think you're getting out of here without buying one, you got another thing coming, the doors are locked, and I will chase you. And one thing is that I sort of underestimated myself a little bit We might have more people than we have books. That's a very good problem. Also, my husband works in shipping, so I get free shipping on things. For everybody who isn't able to get a book tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to write down your name, your phone number, your address, and we're going to get those books to you. Either we'll have them delivered here and you can pick them up with August, or we'll get them to your home. But we are going to make sure that everybody gets as many books as they want, because it's important that those seeds get planted. And I just want to say thank you so much to August and to ASBURY for making this happen. I'm just so profoundly grateful.
And I just want to say, Nico, it's been an honor to get to know you today, and I feel like I have a new friend in you, and I want you to feel like everyone here is your friend, and we welcome you here. And let us go forth in love, and let us go forth as friends. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Also, books are $25. I take everything. Cash, card, Venmo. Please don't give me a check, but I will take one. PayPal, Zelle, whatever you got, I'll take it. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. Who did I make it out to? Okay, cool. You were ready. I was. Good thing I turned it off.